Welcome to Health Insight MD. Today you're going to learn about small daily habits that slowly make insulin resistance worse, and why these choices can make diabetes harder to control over time. Before we start, please click the like button. That really motivates us to keep creating content to help you, and it also helps this video reach more people who need this information. Now, let's get into today's video.
Small bad habits, when repeated daily, create a lifestyle scenario where the body adapts to the imbalance. The most dangerous thing is that none of this seems serious at first, precisely because they are common, socially accepted habits. Many people only realize it when glucose levels are already higher and more difficult to control. Symptoms such as constant fatigue, frequent hunger, and difficulty concentrating become part of the routine. Classic signs of insulin resistance. Understanding this completely changes the way we view insulin resistance. It's not about guilt, but about awareness. When you realize that it is the small daily choices that shape insulin sensitivity, you begin to see glucose control in a more strategic and sustainable way. And it is precisely from this awareness that it makes sense to pay attention to those seemingly harmless choices that, silently, may be worsening insulin resistance without you realizing it. One of the small daily choices that silently worsen insulin resistance is something that many people do every day without realizing it. Always eating in a hurry, eating quickly, distracted by your cell phone, in front of the television, or under constant stress affects much more than digestion. This seemingly harmless habit directly interferes with blood sugar control and contributes to the worsening of insulin resistance over time. When we eat in a hurry, the body goes into alert mode. The nervous system understands that there is stress involved, and in this state digestion does not happen efficiently. The hormones responsible for satiety, insulin release, and blood sugar regulation become unbalanced. The result is a worse glycemic response, with higher glucose spikes and greater difficulty for the body to deal with blood sugar. This is a classic example of daily habits that worsen insulin resistance. In addition, eating quickly prevents the body from correctly recognizing hunger and satiety signals. Many people with diabetes or insulin resistance report that they eat a full meal and, shortly afterward, already feel hungry again. This happens because the brain has not had time to process the appropriate hormonal signals. This pattern favors unintentional excesses, makes blood sugar control difficult, and increases diabetes, blood sugar problems in daily life. Over time, this habit creates a silent cycle: poor digestion, increased glucose release into the bloodstream, increased insulin production, and consequently, blood sugar that is hard to control. Many people believe they are only making mistakes in their diet when, in fact, they are committing one of the main diabetes: nutrition mistakes related to daily behavior. Paying attention to how you eat is a simple yet powerful strategy for those seeking to manage blood sugar naturally and improve insulin sensitivity. Eating mindfully, chewing better, and reducing stress during meals are not just details. They are essential parts of a lifestyle that promotes metabolic health and helps the body respond better to insulin over time. Another small daily choice that often goes unnoticed but has a profound impact on insulin resistance is poor or insufficient sleep. Many people view short nights or fragmented sleep as normal in modern life. But the body doesn't interpret it that way. When sleep is insufficient, the body enters a state of constant alert, raising cortisol, which is one of the hormones most directly linked to blood sugar imbalance and difficulty controlling blood sugar. During a quality night's sleep, the body adjusts. Hormones essential for metabolism regulates insulin action and prepares cells to respond better to glucose the next day. When this process is interrupted, even by just a few hours less sleep, insulin sensitivity decreases. This means that the next day, blood sugar tends to rise more easily, even when eating the same things as always. This is one of the most common and undervalued daily habits that worsen insulin resistance. Over time, repeated bad nights create a cumulative effect. The body starts producing more insulin to try to compensate, which leads to a state of blood sugar that is hard to control. Many people with diabetes or prediabetes experience this in practice. They wake up already tired, hungry at odd hours, craving more carbohydrates, and with more unstable glucose levels throughout the day. It's not a lack of discipline, it's physiology. Poor sleep disrupts the entire blood glucose regulation system. Perhaps, while you listen to this, you are thinking, wow, this happens to me almost every day, and if this topic made sense to you, leave a comment here about how your sleep has been lately or which part touched you the most so far. Your experience can help other people who are also trying to understand why insulin resistance seems to worsen even without major excesses. When you comment, you strengthen this conversation and help this content reach those who really need it. If this video is bringing you clarity about simple choices that impact diabetes, liking the video is a silent but powerful way to support this work. And if you feel that this type of information helps you see glucose control with more awareness, subscribing to the channel is a way to continue walking together, receiving content that makes sense for the real lives of those living with diabetes. Your participation is what transforms this space into a community that learns together, step by step. And there are still important choices coming up. Another very common small daily choice, especially among people living with diabetes or insulin resistance, is skipping meals, thinking that this will help control glucose. At first glance, the idea seems logical. If I eat less often, my blood sugar won't rise. But in practice, this habit usually has the opposite effect and becomes one of the daily habits that worsen insulin resistance. When you go many hours without eating, the body goes into economy mode. To maintain basic functioning, it releases more glucose into the bloodstream through the liver, raising blood sugar even without food intake. In addition, this prolonged fasting increases cortisol, the same stress hormone that hinders the action of insulin. The result is a classic scenario of blood sugar hard to control, especially in those who already have insulin resistance or diabetes, blood sugar control problems. Another important point is what happens at the next meal. After long periods without eating, the body tends to overreact to food, generating more intense blood sugar spikes. Even meals considered balanced can cause higher glucose spikes because insulin sensitivity is temporarily reduced. This cycle repeats itself day after day and directly contributes to the worsening of insulin resistance without the person realizing the connection to this seemingly harmless habit. Many people report that they do this to help but end up feeling more tired, irritable, with uncontrolled hunger and difficulty concentrating. These signs show that the metabolism is under pressure. It's not about eating all the time, but about respecting the body's signals and creating a food routine that favors blood glucose regulation. When meals are spaced too far apart without a strategy, the body loses its ability to maintain balance, and insulin resistance finds the perfect environment to intensify. Understanding this completely changes how you view glucose control. Sometimes, what seems like discipline is actually just another one of the diabetes nutrition mistakes that silently sabotage metabolism. And noticing these small choices is the first step in transforming your relationship with food and your own body. Another small daily choice that often goes unnoticed and contributes to daily habits that worsen insulin resistance is relying too heavily on processed foods labeled fit, light, or healthy. These products often convey a false sense of security, leading many people to believe they can consume them daily without impacting glucose control. The problem is that behind the attractive label, there is often a combination of ingredients that makes blood glucose control difficult. It is common for these foods to contain hidden sugars, refined flours, modified starches, and sweeteners that alter the glycemic response. Even when the amount of sugar seems low, the sum of these ingredients can generate blood sugar spikes, especially in people with insulin resistance or diabetes. Consumed repeatedly, these products become a silent factor and hard to control blood sugar because they do not cause a very noticeable immediate spike, but keep glucose constantly unstable throughout the day. Another point that is rarely discussed is that many of these healthy foods have low nutritional value. They do not offer the nutrients for blood sugar control that the body needs to respond well to insulin. This creates a typical scenario of diabetes, blood sugar control problems, in which the person believes they are making good choices but continues to face difficulties in keeping glucose balanced. This is one of the most common diabetes nutrition mistakes, precisely because it is reinforced by marketing and the convenience of everyday life. When these products are part of the routine, the body begins to receive constant stimuli that favor insulin resistance. The body tries to compensate by releasing more insulin, but over time this strategy fails. The result is that frustrating feeling of I'm eating right, but my blood sugar isn't responding. In practice, this over-reliance on healthy processed foods becomes yet another invisible habit that worsens insulin sensitivity without drawing attention. Becoming aware of this doesn't mean radicalism, but conscious choice. Understanding the real impact of these foods helps you break out of autopilot, strengthen diabetes awareness, and build a dietary pattern that truly supports glucose balance and metabolic health over time. Another extremely common and often overlooked daily choice is sitting for most of the day. Even people who take care of their diet, follow guidelines, and believe they are doing everything right may be reinforcing insulin resistance simply by spending hours sitting. The human body was not made for long periods of inactivity, and this has a direct impact on blood sugar control. When you spend a large part of the day sitting, The muscles are practically not stimulated to use glucose as an energy source. This causes the sugar to remain circulating in the blood for longer, making it difficult for glucose to enter the cells. Overchimi. This pattern contributes to a classic scenario of hard-to-control blood sugar, even without major dietary excesses. It is one of the daily habits that silently worsens insulin resistance. Because it doesn't seem like an obvious mistake. Sedentary behavior directly affects insulin sensitivity. Muscle contraction is one of the most efficient mechanisms to help the body absorb glucose without requiring large amounts of insulin. When this contraction does not occur, the body needs to produce more insulin to try to cope with the sugar in the blood, which further favors insulin resistance. This process is behind many diabetes blood sugar control problems, especially in those who spend the day working sitting down and move very little outside of work. Another important point is that it's not enough to diet. If the body remains in economy mode all day, lack of movement reduces metabolic efficiency and hinders the proper use of nutrients for blood sugar control, creating a constant imbalance. This is why many people feel they are following the diet correctly, but continue to experience blood sugar spikes or frequent fluctuations throughout the day. Understanding the impact of sitting for long periods helps to see that glucose control goes beyond the plate. Small actions, such as getting up more often, walking for a few minutes, stretching the body, and reducing continuous sitting time, are part of a real strategy to manage blood sugar naturally and strengthen diabetes. Awareness. These are simple adjustments, but they make a huge difference when we talk about insulin sensitivity and long-term metabolic health. A daily choice that goes unnoticed by many people is consuming little protein and little fiber in meals, even when there is no apparent sugar on the plate. Unbalanced meals can cause blood sugar spikes and silently contribute to insulin resistance. This is one of the most common mistakes people make when trying to control diabetes by simply cutting out sugar. But they don't pay attention to the complete composition of the meal. Protein and fiber play a fundamental role in blood sugar control. They slow down digestion, reduce the rate at which glucose enters the bloodstream, and help maintain more stable blood sugar levels. When these two components are lacking, the body absorbs carbohydrates much faster, even if the amount is small. The result is a hard-to-control blood sugar pattern, with frequent peaks and troughs throughout the day. Over time, this type of diet promotes insulin resistance. Meals low in fiber and protein require greater insulin responses to handle glucose, which overloads the metabolism. This process is directly linked to diabetes, blood sugar control problems, and is part of the daily habits that worsen insulin resistance, especially when repeated several times a day. Another important point is that unbalanced meals do not generate adequate satiety. This increases hunger shortly afterward, stimulates frequent snacking, and creates a cycle that further impairs glycemic control. In addition, a lack of fiber compromises intestinal health, which is directly related to insulin sensitivity and how the body uses nutrients for blood sugar control. Recognizing the importance of protein and fiber changes the way you view nutrition in diabetes. It's not just about avoiding sugar, but about building meals that truly support glucose balance. This type of awareness is part of a smarter approach to nutrition for diabetes, strengthens diabetes education, and helps those seeking to manage blood sugar naturally in a more efficient and lasting way. A daily choice that many people don't realize is harmful is living in constant stress. When the emotional routine is heavy, the body enters a state of almost permanent alert, raising cortisol levels, the main stress hormone. This frequent increase in cortisol has a direct impact on blood sugar control and is strongly linked to the worsening of insulin resistance, especially in those who already live with diabetes or prediabetes. Cortisol signals to the body that it needs quick energy to deal with a threat. In practice, this means releasing more glucose into the bloodstream. The problem is that when stress becomes chronic, this release happens even without real need. The result is a pattern of blood sugar spikes throughout the day, making blood sugar hard to control, even in people who take care of their diet and avoid excesses. This is one of the small daily choices that quietly worsen insulin resistance, because stress is rarely treated as part of the problem. In addition, constant stress reduces the sensitivity of cells to insulin. Over time, the body needs to produce more and more insulin to try to balance glucose, which favors diabetes blood sugar control problems. Many people feel they are doing everything right, but continue to have poor test results, without realizing that the emotional factor is silently sabotaging their metabolism. It's important to validate those who live under constant pressure, whether from work, family responsibilities, financial problems, or emotional burden. This isn't about a lack of discipline or self-care. The body simply responds to stress as it's programmed to respond. Ignoring this factor is one of the biggest diabetes nutrition mistakes, because glucose control depends not only on what you eat, but also on your hormonal and emotional state. When we understand this connection, it becomes clear that managing stress is part of the diabetes lifestyle and one of the most important diabetes health tips for those seeking to improve insulin sensitivity. Small changes in how we deal with our emotional routine can have as big an impact as adjustments to our diet, helping to restore blood sugar balance and strengthen blood glucose regulation over time. Ignoring the body's signals is one of the most common and, at the same time, most dangerous choices when it comes to insulin resistance and glucose control. Constante fatigue lhes hunger, drowsiness after meals, difficulty concentrating, and that feeling of a slow mind are symptoms that many people learn to normalize in their daily lives. The person follows their routine, continues working, taking care of the house, the family, and pushes these signals aside as if they were just part of a busy life. But, in reality, these are clear warnings that the body is struggling to keep blood sugar under control. When insulin resistance begins to worsen, the body has difficulty using glucose efficiently. This generates fluctuations in blood sugar, which are reflected exactly in these seemingly simple symptoms. The problem is that, by ignoring these warnings, the imbalance deepens. The body tries to compensate by producing more insulin. The metabolism becomes overloaded, and blood sugar control becomes increasingly unstable. It's not a lack of willpower, nor carelessness. Often it's a lack of awareness that the body is talking all the time. But no one has taught us to listen. If, while listening to this, you realize that you have already felt some of these signs and never connected the dots, Leave a comment here about what made the most sense to you so far. Your experience can help other people who are going through exactly the same thing. And if this content is helping you see diabetes in a clearer and more realistic way, liking the video is a simple way to show this and support this type of information, reaching more people. Subscribing to the channel also makes all the difference, because that's how this community grows and continues to receive content focused on diabetes, metabolic health, and daily choices that really impact glucose. And stay with me, because in the next 2 points, I'm going to talk about even more common choices, those that almost no one associates with diabetes, but which have a direct impact on insulin sensitivity and may be sabotaging your glycemic control without you even realizing it. When we understand this connection, it becomes clear that managing stress is part of the diabetes lifestyle and one of the most important diabetes health tips for those seeking to improve insulin sensitivity. Small changes in how we deal with our emotional routine can have as big an impact as adjustments to our diet, helping to restore blood sugar balance and strengthen blood glucose regulation over time. Ignoring the body's signals is one of the most common and, at the same time, most dangerous choices when it comes to insulin resistance and glucose control. Constante fatigue hunger, drowsiness after meals, difficulty concentrating, and that feeling of a slow mind are symptoms that many people learned to normalize in their daily lives. The person follows their routine, continues working, taking care of the house, the family, and pushes these signals aside as if they were just part of a busy life. But, in reality, these are clear warnings that the body is struggling to keep blood sugar under control. When insulin resistance begins to worsen, the body has difficulty using glucose efficiently. This generates fluctuations in blood sugar, which are reflected exactly in these seemingly simple symptoms. The problem is that, by ignoring these warnings, the imbalance deepens. The body tries to compensate by producing more insulin. The metabolism becomes overloaded, and blood sugar control becomes increasingly unstable. It's not a lack of willpower, nor carelessness. Often it's a lack of awareness that the body is talking all the time. But no one has taught us to listen. If, while listening to this, you realize that you have already felt some of these signs and never connected the dots, leave a comment here about what made the most sense to you so far. Your experience can help other people who are going through exactly the same thing. And if this content is helping you see diabetes in a clearer and more realistic way, liking the video is a simple way to show this and support this type of information, reaching more people. Subscribing to the channel also makes all the difference, because that's how this community grows and continues to receive content focused on diabetes, metabolic health, and daily choices that really impact glucose. And stay with me, because in the next 2 points, I'm going to talk about even more common choices, those that almost no one associates with diabetes, but which have a direct impact on insulin sensitivity and may be sabotaging your glycemic control without you even realizing it. Daily choice number 2, believing that if glucose didn't rise today, everything is fine. One of the most silent mistakes in glucose control in diabetes is looking only at the spot, number of blood glucose levels, and believing that this tells the whole story. Many people see a seemingly normal value at the moment and feel relieved, as if insulin resistance were under control. But what almost no one realizes is that the problem is not just in the immediate result, but in the metabolic process that happens behind that number. The body is extremely intelligent and, for a while, manages to compensate for bad habits by producing more insulin to keep blood sugar stable. But this compensation has a high cost. Gradually, the cells respond less and less to insulin. Metabolic inflammation increases, and blood sugar control becomes more difficult, even when the values still seem acceptable. This is how many cases of insulin resistance worsen silently. This behavior masks important signs of hormonal imbalance and creates a false sense of security. Over time, the pancreas becomes overloaded. Unexpected glycemic spikes occur, and that common frustration arises for those who feel that out of nowhere their diabetes has spiraled out of control. The truth is that insulin resistance doesn't appear suddenly. It builds up when small warnings from the body are ignored, and daily choices are repeated without conscious adjustments within the diabetes lifestyle. Daily choice number 1, treating diet as the only factor and ignoring lifestyle. The most neglected and perhaps the most dangerous choice is believing that simply cutting sugar or adjusting carbohydrates solves everything in controlling diabetes. Insulin resistance doesn't depend solely on diet. It is profoundly influenced by lifestyle as a whole. Poor sleep, constant stress, sedentary lifestyle, little sun exposure, and even the fast pace of daily life directly impact blood glucose regulation, even following a diet considered correct for diabetes. These factors can keep insulin malfunctioning and hinder glucose from entering cells. This is where many people feel stuck, making an effort, following nutritional guidelines, but without seeing consistent results in blood sugar control. When lifestyle doesn't support metabolic health, the body goes into survival mode, raising hormones like cortisol and favoring energy storage, which further worsens insulin resistance. Understanding this completely changes the way you look at diabetes. It shows that blood sugar control doesn't just happen on the plate, but also in the small choices outside of it. Sleep, movement, stress management, and daily routine are fundamental pieces of this puzzle, and it is precisely this awareness that paves the way for real, sustainable, and effective changes in glycemic control over time. If you've made it this far, you've already realized that insulin resistance and diabetes control aren't about perfection, but about awareness. Small choices made every day, often automatically, have a huge impact on glucose control and how the body responds to insulin. When we understand this, everything changes, because it stops being a solitary struggle and becomes a possible, step-by-step process in real life. If any of these choices I've shared today have been or are still part of your routine, like this video, this like isn't just a click. It's a sign that this conversation made sense to you. Subscribing to the channel is also a simple way to stay with me, learning more about diabetes, metabolic health, and practical strategies to improve insulin sensitivity without extremism. And if you can, leave a comment below writing, "This message was for me," or "I made it to the end." I really read them. And it helps the channel reach other people who are going through the same challenge. There's a video over here that perfectly complements this topic and delves even deeper into how small daily changes can transform blood sugar control. Click on it and continue watching.